the excavation of the Anglo-Saxon coffins and church at Great Ryburgh. We'll do announcements and things after that, so I will hand over to James.
Cheers. Good afternoon. My name's Jim and I work for MOLA based in Northampton, which is why we were doing rural archaeology in Norfolk. Just in case you're wondering why we're doing it here. But, so back in February 2016, we basically started excavation for this fishing lake on some land some guys digging in Great Ryburgh. Unfortunately, at the moment, we're still in the initial phases of analysis, so we've got the full details on it.
Let me see if I can make this any louder. It's probably up as far as it can.
I will try and speak louder. So like I say, currently we're in this first phases of initial analysis, so we don't know full details on the individuals in the cemetery or on the coffins. So we're trying to include as many photos of skeletons and coffins basically, and the shiny objects. So to begin with, just some background information, just in case you don't know where Norfolk is. Norwich there, and Great Ryburgh here. The site was basically just on the outskirts of the main village of Great Ryburgh. The current church, St Andrew's, is here, roughly about 70 metres away from our excavation area. Basically the River Wenson running down the east side of the site. The original course of this river was actually further east, where the parish boundary is now. But due to, it was diverted in the 17th and 18th century for the mill complex just south of the site, which probably aided preservation. Before we began work, one of our illustrators at MOLA went and did an earthwork survey of the entire field, just basically record what they could see on the surface, any marks from the beach, things like that. The main thing picked up was a series of ditches running east-west, a small moated enclosure, and then these ditches running north-south. The north-south ones are post-medieval date. We found bricks, mortar. This is sloughs for the base of the pub, most likely for the mill, like I say, which was situated around here. These little test pits dug here. Some pottery came out of these for these ditches here, medieval and Saxon date. So around the area, some previous archaeology was found. In the 70s, just at Bridge Road here, there was some unidentified bone found in some of the driveway. No real record of it, there's no bone in the area. And then an evaluation works in 2010 was done around here, which found some Iron Age stuff. So from here, we started excavating. At the time we started February, there was a lot of water around, which didn't help really. So we started excavating in the top here, and on day one, roughly about 9 o'clock, I've been there half an hour, we found a bit of wood in situ. First thought was, maybe no fence posts, nothing probably survived here in terms of wood. As we cleaned up, we found out it made a rectangle. Sorry. So in February, we first started excavating and started stripping the site at the top here. We found a bit of wood in situ, which we thought was probably more later in date. I didn't think something that early would preserve in the sand conditions. As we cleaned this up, we found that it was rectangular in shape, and by this point we've also stripped further back and found 2 rows of basically graves. So after some initial swearing and fancy phone calls, we opened the entire area and realised it was basically a cemetery. At this point we didn't realise the date of it. Our initial estimates put it around, due to standing water, probably about maybe 50 graves. About 4 or 5 had evidence of wood in. So we assumed that maybe a few special burials had coffins. The initial results from the survey, so we pictured Roman activity, which is this enclosure here, and a few pits around here, as well as 2 pottery kilns, which I'll get onto later. These ditches here are primarily medieval in date and look to be drainage ditches, basically running towards the river. It's a large boundary ditch. It's contemporary with the cemetery and this enclosure being mid-Saxon, containing a lot of butchered bone, pottery and things like that. Due to the waterlogged conditions, due to the high water table, is basically what helped preserve the site. Because, like we say, usually in sand, it's very acidic and nothing really survives very well, including bone, wood and any organic material. But due to the river, which feeds through chalk, it neutralised the acidic conditions, preserving basic coffins and skeletons. You see here, this is one of the coffins dug out. We initially, to see what we had, dug 3 coffins. One of these norths, it's a bit hard to see in this one, but there's basically 2 north-south graves here, which are earlier in dates, which could possibly be Roman, related to this, or earlier Saxon. So we excavated one of these, a grave at the bottom here, and a grave around here, which are very clear wood, which is this one. This was roughly about 3 or 4 inches thick of oak. So, in the next slide, you'll see the other grave we dug, which is this one. This contained no wood, but I did have a full skeleton. So with our initial 3 graves, we thought, oh, it's just maybe the odd few coffins and things like that, maybe just well-preserved remains. This is the first site visit we had with the county archaeologist. As you can see, it's not great digging weather. This is actually a coffin lid, which is basically slightly moved out of position. This is the one we lifted later on, I think, and it took about 6 of us to get out of the ground. The main thing we found, basically from now I'm going to basically go through the excavation as a whole, because I say we've not done full analysis at the moment, so we'll take you through what happened on site. Where we found the most metalwork and the shiny finds was in the topsoil, which has to be stripped off the site, we metal detected, walked over and tested. Fortunately, because it was a flood defences and a fishing lake, all the topsoil removed was used to create bunds around the field, which meant we could keep going over and stuff washed out like that. Because it's basically untouched land, no farming had been done in this area, anything like that. It's just silts that built up over and over time. So everything that's been dropped, lost or discarded remained in the topsoil. So I'll just go through these. We'll start with the Roman stuff. This is the terminal of a linchpin that was found. You see there, it's basically copper alloy with iron as well. The corrosion has caused it to split, or start to split anyway. This was Roman 1st century BC. And we have a series of coins. This is a Constantine II, roughly 322 AD, about 20 millimetres in diameter. So we've got the laurel bust on one side and an altar with a globe and a couple of stars across the top. This is another Roman coin. It's about 337 AD, 70 millimetres in diameter, and it's Constantine II. So again, a bust, a little camp gate with a star and a couple of turrets. Moving into the medieval period, these are some Saxon skeets. On the left, this one here, with the plume bird style, with the standard pellet patterns. On this side, porcupine style, and standard on the other side. These dates are roughly the 8th century, and both were about 12 millimetres in diameter. This is just one of the silver pennies we found. Again, roughly about 9th century, about 20 millimetres in diameter. And you see on one side we have the cross with crescent shapes inside, and the other crescent with some wedge shapes. Again, roughly Saxon date, 8th to 9th century. 28 millimeters in diameter, in length, sorry, a little pin, which is basically a 13-faced polyhedral head on it. There's a few of these in the display downstairs, I never known it before. We had a Viking trifold brooch, roughly dates 850 AD to 950 BD, the AD. Copper alloy and about 38 millimetres wide. Again, a couple more of these are found afterwards. Once we left site, the landowner turned over the bunds that he'd used for his flood defences, and some volunteers went over and metal detected it. So we found a few more of these, quite a few more evidence of coin making, some waste lead and things like that. So this is probably one of the most interesting ones, a pilgrim badge, which was dated to the 13th, 14th century. So on the right here, sorry, we have St. Peter with cross and the keys. On the left, the St. Paul with the sword, both representing martyrdom and the keys to heaven. One of the more interesting things we found once you search for this on pop antiquities and things like that, these were only made in Rome. Back in 1199, Pope Innocent III declared that basically these could only be made in Rome and basically did a monopoly on them. So this and the trifold brooch that it shows moving through the area, most likely along the Old River. So like I say, this is just an example of the map that we find. We basically, from the top, so we found buckets of unstratified pottery, animal bone, and literally buckets worth of metalwork, lead waste, things like that. One spoon, a lot of brooches, and some buckles and things like that. All date basically from mainly the medieval period. From there, we have this is the site that we opened with the Roman features marked out. So we have the main enclosure here, a couple of east-west ditches, I say, running towards the river, and these two pottery kilns contain the majority of the pottery dated period, which is just down there. Most of it is local sandy wares. In these kilns, we also had remains of kiln plates, kiln bars, some kiln wall, and also some Roman tile, which looked like it may have been repurposed as lining. Environmental samples from the kilns show that they also basically contain burnt cereals, which basically seems to suggest they were also being used to dry some grains as well. So the main methodology at the moment was basically cemetery was left for now until we could apply funding from Historic England. So we dealt with everything else within the fishing lake, which is basically everything's basically south. This boundary ditch was completed. Moved from there really. Another thing was also in the kilns we found some examples of veiled vessels. Basically, these were basically pottery shards that showed no use of wear, as just seemed to be discarded back within the kiln. This is just a bit of drone footage, so I just had to jump under this for a second. Yeah, so this is when we went back in May. By this point, the rest of the lake had been extracted. Like I say, we basically excavated up to the main Saxon boundary ditch. So that's the current day church over there, which originates in the late Saxon period and then was modified in Norman. So the river running along here, just gradually move along, you'll see that basically at this point, I think it's end of May, we've dug about half the cemetery and working our way towards the corner. So we can probably just make out here is another enclosure dating to the same period. This was a small rectangular one that was contemporary based on pottery dates with the cemetery and church. It didn't appear to be a structure, unlike the church we'll show later on. I say this is where we've done basically all the topsoil was dumped to create a bund between the lake and the river. So that's been turned over. That's where the Maltic enclosure is. Again, this didn't fall in our excavation area, and we're not really sure what it was used for or what date it is. So you see here, these have all been uncovered for the drone photos, but you see coffin bases currently still left in. And one advantage of it being a very wet site, we can preserve any wood we want to keep in our drainage ditches. So we'll be basically working our way along here, and so we've still got most of the cemetery at the top here to deal with. So you might just be able to make out where the current farm is, which is here, which is roughly where the old mill complex was. And again, say this is where the topsoil bunds all put down, so we're able to keep going over that stuff, washed out, find more and more finds. Again, also with this, like I said, this is untouched land as well. This is also untouched. Nothing. This hasn't been used for anything since records began. So hopefully, maybe something interesting there if someone wants to dig it up. So this is the still on the side, just to run over our methodology really. So you'll see half the cemetery is done, and this, what our main plan was, we excavated the remains, and then they were recorded using photo rectification, which you'll see is where all these little white tags are for. So instead of hand drawing the plans, which wasn't really feasible due to a lot of water rushing into the grave, we put these tags in, photograph from above the skeleton, and when these tags are GPSed in, it gives an accurate scale. So if we want to create a plan of the skeleton, we can use that photo and it gives the proper measurements for the remains. It also means if we want to, we could get a nice drone photo and try and overlay all the graves in one shot, which makes it look like we're doing really quick work and doing that entire thing. The wood itself, at request of our specialist, was hand drawn, as this allowed to give more detail about any markings and anything like that, and basically preservation. And also annotate things like that. We then obviously did extensive digital photographs of cross sections, any weird knots or any marks on the wood. The wood was then left in situ, so because historically we did the wood sampling, so we basically left these in situ, covered with this acrylic matting and these large sheets of terram, which basically allowed us to keep it all wet and just keep throwing water over the top of it, and allow basically these let survive a good month until the wood specialist was able to come out and take these cross sections for dendro and carbon dating. And just so it didn't too pretty, so this was in roughly May, and this was June. This was about 2 weeks before we were trying to finish. You can see where the wood specialist has been by the trail of wood left around. It's not a very nice feeling when you've kept them nice for 2 months and a guy turns up with a sore. But he basically took his blood samples, they were then put back in the graves once we could actually get back on site. As I say, water management was one of the main issues we had. So we dug a drainage ditch around here, and I spent a good month while people actually dug the cemetery just redigging a drainage ditch, which I dug in the first place. So can't really decide. And this is the completed cemetery. So it's a bit clear on the plan. We have these main rows of graves, the church. We called it a structure for the 2 months, then just gave up. And they put the church in the centre here. So you say all the wood is still in situ here at the moment, but basically was left. And they say we just kept any bits we wanted to keep on here.
Sorry, what was that last bit?
All the wood is left in situ for this, as I say, until the wood specialist came along, and then all the bits you were keeping were kept in a handy hole, get wet. So in the cemetery itself, we had 89 burials. 6 were plank lined, which these ones marked in red. There's 6 there, yep. 76 were dug out, and we had about 7 with no wood. They're not all marked on here, the ones with no wood, because we had a couple of graves that were stacked on top of each other. The old ones underneath, the wood hadn't preserved or had not been there in the first place. That was 1 grave here and 1 grave here. Now we think based on the layout that obviously grave markers were used, so we don't think these the ones where they were cut into each other must be accident. It may be that it was basically recut and added to the same grave. It wasn't exactly perfect, but they were pretty spot on. Yeah. These are the two early graves, which possibly Roman or possibly early Saxon. We can't tell. There's very little bone left. Wasn't any grave goods. So hopefully, maybe some analysis of the bones later on may give us a closer date of when they were dug. It was just obviously very clear that one had a coffin going through it. So it's very clear what's going on. The church itself, one thing to point out, say the grave markers, just so it's clear, we've got the open post hole at the end of some of the coffins. The church itself is just a single beam slot, so with a lot of external post holes. The entranceway looks a bit south here, but has been closed off by this feature. So whether it went out to use and closed off, basically demolished it, we don't know. But what we did have in situ was 6 timbers evenly spaced along this side of the church in the beam slot. We had one little bit of wood, which looked like it could have been a timber in here. So these were upright, thin bits of wood that basically just survived. They're probably about 20 centimetres tall in little indentations along this side. Let's say all the coffins respect the church, apart from this one, which annoyed us quite a bit to begin with. But looking at some sources, it's most likely, say Bede, a good read of, could be either an important person in the community or a member of the clergy that's buried within the church. Because, like I say, obviously it's dug into the beam slot, but the timbers surviving for the actual wall, or what would have been the wall, were basically just in the middle there. So it looks like it's been dug in right up against the wall of the church. So all this really points to a Christian tradition. Like I say, we've got the east-west graves, respecting the church in the centre, grave markers, and absolutely no grave goods of any of the graves. Like I say, this is that other enclosure down here, which I say it does have some associated post holes, but didn't really look structural in comparison to definitely one of the centre of the cemetery. So the extent of the cemetery, like I say, we have a very clear southern end of the cemetery. Like I say, the large Saxon boundary ditch was roughly down here. Again, like I say, which is filled with waste material, so mid-Saxon pot, a lot of Ipswich ware. So mid-Saxon pottery, a lot of butchered bone and waste materials, as well as some more preserved posts and basically wood. So obviously there is a living community nearby, but we didn't have any evidence on site, apart from the fact that people were burying people did. So, say the eastern boundary is marked by some post. What we think is the eastern boundary is marked by some post holes here. These two in situ here are these. I say, and this is it once we've removed it. Again, these have all been sampled as well by historians, so hopefully we can get some dates of when these were put in and things like that. The one extent we don't know is how far this goes north. So like I say, there was originally planned to do another extension, just a trial trench here, to see if we could find any more, but this was determined to be not necessary, and we basically didn't have the time or the funding, unfortunately. So we don't entirely sure how far these move that way. These kind of start to disperse a bit around here, but we've got some good solid roads here. There is a gap. We did test bits quite a lot, just to make sure, but it could extend further. And this is the preservation on site. Again, it was really mixed, unfortunately. We couldn't see any trends on site. These are marked out. The light blue, the lightest blue is up to 20% of the skeleton remaining. The darkest blue is up to 100%. So you'll see, like I say, you've got areas where you've got good preservation for some, and then with others, there's very little remains left. So we're not entirely sure. It's either based on very localised preservation, or it could be that basically water levels at the time of burying things like that, or how well sealed their coffins. Because there's quite a lot of movement from water and stuff on site. The one on the right here is the children of which we currently think are children. We've got 4 adolescents, which is 13 to 17 year olds, and we have 1 juvenile here, which is 1 year to 12 years old. Again, this could all change with further analysis, but based on the quick assessment, that's what we think we've got so far. Hopefully, for full assessment, we'll be able to identify a lot of gender and age. About 40% still have intact pelvises, which we used to identify gender and things like that. Those that didn't have the preserved pelvis, most of them still had skull fragments left, which, although not accurate, should help us estimate. Only 11% didn't have skulls, so possibly be able to get some good answers. And like I say, further research is hopefully going to do DNA and isotope analysis as well on the human remains. So I can answer quite a few questions. Another thing is basically, although preservation was moderate to poor, basically assessment by osteologists, with quite a lot of the long bones, joints and vertebrae deteriorating. So trying to find evidence of disease and things like that may be more difficult as well. So this is a couple of, basically just to show the preservation side. This grave here had 100% preservation skeleton, but as you can see the coffin is basically nearly virtually gone, just with left with staining and a small fragment of wood at the feet here. This coffin, again, this one had a lid originally, and it appears that basically very little silt on the inside, but as water's got in, it's created like an iron panning effect around the base. It's obviously deteriorated the skull and the torso. A few other examples. This is the base of one of the first slides, the lid in the very mud conditions. Once we lifted the lid, we started excavating, and this is the coffin base. It's probably one of the best preserved examples, and this is the one I think that we kept, which I think has been preserved up in York. So again, you can see where the water has got in and deteriorated some of the bone, but again, this one relatively complete skeleton. One on the right here is one of the plank line graves. You see where the eastern end has got, that's deteriorated, some deterioration on the other side. This fragment here is a fragment of Ipswich Square that we got from the backfill, which is basically where it was found as well. Like I say, we didn't have any grave goods, but we had about 3 or 4 fragments of Ipswich Square found within some of the backfill graves. This one on the right here, on the bottom right here, so it's basically just to show some of the movement of the remains. So like I say, quite a lot of these most originally had lids probably, and as water got in, some remains have moved around. So the skull's out of place. We had a couple where pelvis bones were up by the head, legs had gone somewhere and basically moved around. This is one of the plank lines. So the plank line graves, say, are in red here. We had these two here at the north west of the church. Their construction was identical. So you'll see here, these are the two, these basically ends that preserved were these 2 western ends. So what you see here is the socket which the base plank slotted into. You just about see the indentation there where the base plank was. But it does mean, however, that the protruding from the bottom would have been this. So we're not entirely sure. Let's say some specialists have a look at it, and hopefully they can find some examples for us. But essentially, they were extended below the base of the coffin. I don't want to say it would look like a table, but that's what we've got. All of these look to be oak, except for, I think it was this plank line one here, which seems to be a species of willow, according to initial assessment by Historic England. This is another example of this plank line. This is that grave here. So this one's constructed differently. We basically might be able to see a slight indentation on the side. This one seems to be pegged together. This one actually had about, I think all sides are pretty much intact, apart from this one at the top here. But it did have, however, which got people excited, was this stuff, which looks to be some remains of some sort of like reed bedding in the bottom of the grave. You see here was just a close example. And this here is basically the cross section of one of the planks. Most of them are few examples came in from lids, either small fragments or bigger pieces. You see on the right here where the lid is collapsed inwards and basically pushed the remains to the side of the coffin. You may just be able to make out as well. There's that basically a grey bit of sand here, which is where some of the backfill has fallen behind the side of the coffin, pushing that over. This one, it's very hard to tell, that is lid. Probably just make out some long bones there sandwiched between the base and the lid of the coffin. So, unfortunately, very little remains of the skeleton, but with a sliver of wood which will have to be the lid on top of some of the leg bones. So, what the quality of the coffins varied. Some unfortunate person was manoeuvred into that. But you can obviously, what this did show was that obviously the graves have been dug to accommodate the coffin. So obviously this has been dug in a very bent out shape. One thing that was more specialist in noticed quite a few of them was the wood being used was from basically higher up the tree. So it's the stuff which is either twisted, heavily knotted. It's not ideal for planks really. So it's, as he noted, it's a similar technique and similar wood that you would use to make troughs or canoes, things like that. It's basically stuff you can turn into basically nice, neat planks. But we did have some rather nice, straight, substantial ones, but again, some heavy knots on the inside. You'll see here where the end pieces of the dugout coffins were kept in place to form the ends. He reckons these would have taken about 3 or 4 days to make. But even if these are basically, as we like to point out, it's basically not the best wood, it's still a substantial resource that has been used. Because like I say, originally we thought there wouldn't be that many coffins on site. We thought maybe 5 to 10 based on the wood we could see on the surface. Because again, it's just a huge amount of time and resources. But like I say, the vast majority contain a dugout coffin. Again, this is to show a bit more preservation on site. So in most cases, with the dugout ones, we had a good substantial coffin base. But in quite a few cases, we had a lot of deterioration. We had one, as I say, burial, you can't tell, we had about 15 centimetre stick left at the bottom of the grave with about one long bone on top. So, you assumed it was a grave. This one again, you can see more substantial. The end piece is left in place to form the ends, and you can just start to see little fragments of the lid remaining across the head. Oh, just to show you. That's what happened if we left it for a day or two. So, like I say, we had to record it relatively quickly. This is some examples of the dugout lids. So, again, this is one from before. See the piece of wood that's survived across the head and torso. This is probably one of the more intact ones, which unfortunately has been split lengthways, but that's a full dugout coffin lid. And again, this is another good sizable piece that survived. This along here was another fragment that's managed to hold on to the side really. We can see as well the skeleton underneath there. You can just about make out on the other side, very little coffin remaining, that one. The coffin lids appear to survive more frequently in the northern half of the cemetery. So whether basically, well, I don't know, I'm not sure what conditions that was caused by, but for some reason in the north, a lot more of the dugout coffins had surviving lids and lid fragments. And this is just a cross section after the wood specialist has been in and done his thing of one of the dugout coffins. So this is the base here, and we put the lid fragment back on top. So you can see basically as a whole the coffin would have just looked like a section of tree trunk. It's obviously very interesting. That's really it for the site really. One of the nice things about this site was basically, as shown by what you got here, everyone was really interested in it, which meant I had to ask a lot of bullshit questions, but we say we got on all the newspapers, and like I say, this is going to be a bit of a shameless plug, but currently we're nominated for Rescue Dig of the Year with current archaeology. I will say we're the only site in Norfolk that sways you anyway. feel free to vote online. That's it, really. So I say, future work. One of some of the key things we took from the site, I say, coffins and graves periods seldom survive. There is evidence of dugout coffins being used in earlier Saxon cemeteries, but only with wood staining surviving. So what this site does show is that tradition used in pagan times, in early Saxon periods, is continuing to be used in the Christian tradition. Another thing I say, from here we're hoping to get the wood analysed fully with samples, get dendro dates, carbon dates, things like that, and with the skeletons, isotope analysis and DNA analysis to further work out who we have buried here and what lifestyle they led. And that is it.
Right, well, thank you very much, and that's wonderful. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions. People would like to start.
Yes.
What is likely timescale of publication? And in the meantime, are the images available anywhere for people to look at?
Could you repeat the question each time? Because
Oh yes.
if it's at the back, we can't hear what the question is.
What's the publication deadline, and how many photos online that we see? So we're currently doing an updated project design, which basically puts forward what we're going to do next. As for when the full report will be finished, I don't know, I'm afraid. Hopefully soon, because I want to write it, but it depends on what basic deadlines and what the work we've got, unfortunately. As for publication, I really don't know how far ahead that would be. I've not been told, unfortunately. Photos online, there's a few put up for a blog that MOLA did on the website, which is, I think there's some drone photos of the cemetery and a few of the dugout ones. And like I say, there should be, if you Google it, there's quite a lot of publicity photos still knocking around online as well.
What about the plans?
I'll have to find out about that. I don't think they've been released to anyone. I don't know when they will be. But like I say, once the UPD's, the objective product design is done, that does just get maybe put online as grey literature. So if you look hard enough, that should be around somewhere. But say, I don't think there's any plan to be too much detail ones.
Were there really no graves in the southwest corner of your church?
Southwest.
The big white area.
Go down a notch again.
Oh,
There.
on this bit?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nothing there.
We cleaned it 3 times.
Then I think you're dismissing enclosure 3 too fast as nothing.
No, I say originally we thought we were going to structure. So we cleaned that area extensively.
Yeah.
After each time it flooded. We didn't find any evidence of any more burials in this way. I say we dug this, we found some very shallow either post holes or stake holes within the enclosure. But I said the ditch itself was basically, unlike the beam slot area, which was basically rectangular vertical slided, was a very shallow concave depression, really, with not much to it. We say it could have been another structure, but the evidence we had surviving left, we can't say for certain.
Because it's alignment and
Yeah, we say
the lack of anything
it's
suggests.
definitely contemporary with this.
Yeah.
So you know, as to we can't definitely say what it is, unfortunately.
Why do you think there's so few juvenile burials? Is it just an accident of survival?
It's I say until the I'll show just further analysis, it's hard to tell. I say we did have one more, which we don't know, that one there, which we dug. The coffin itself was only about 1.20 meters, so there could be some more around. It's also whether if the cemetery did extend further, maybe they had to do one in a different area, which like I say, through preservation and the analysis so far, we've not been able to distinguish a set group or if there is a more proportionate amount within the cemetery.
How big was the church and what was the alignment? How far off the east-west alignment was it?
Of this church here,
Yeah.
it was roughly about 4 by 7 metres, and it was, I think, say, north is the top of the thing there, so it's just off east-west, but it's obviously in line with all the graves.
Yeah, but do you know exactly what the alignment was? How much off it was?
It's not by the degree, but like I say, north's there, so it's roughly maybe east, north-east.
It's very important. You need to know exactly what it was.
Okay. Like I say, I don't know off the top of my head what it was, unfortunately. So,
How do you know it was a church?
that is a question. And the one we avoided for a good 2 months. Well, I think basically, we didn't want to, what we thought was basically a church or minster chapel, something like that.
7 metres by 4 metres.
Yes. Very small. So like I said, we called it structure for 2 months, but kind of just gave up. But it's based on other case studies we got given off the consultant and some other specialists, it seems to fit with what they know. They know. I don't know, I'm not a specialist, but I'm open to suggestions.
Did you lift all the skeletons?
All the skeletons were lifted and have been basically went back, get processed, analysed. The coffins, we've kept 2. So we kept the dugout coffin and a plank coffin, which have been preserved. Basically, the manpower and the space to store all these wasn't possible, unfortunately. So they were left in situ and moved later on.
When you finish with the remains, as they're Christian burials, will they come back to Great Ryburgh to be buried in the church?
I don't know the official plan yet, but there was rumours when we were digging on site that they may get reburied at the local church. So hopefully that happens. I think that's what the community wants, and ideally what we want to do as well.
Can you clarify the wood that you're showing there?
Yes.
You said that was elevating something off the ground. That's the base of a coffin.
Yes. So the base of the coffin would have basically, this on the end planks of the coffin.
Yeah.
So this is the top, which is obviously has been tuned higher up and eroded further. But the base plank, which the body would have rested on, was at this level.
Well, there are parallels for that in
I've got a pen.
in Bruges. In Bruges.
Ah, okay.
And I'm sure it's fairly common. And there are probably 2 reasons for it that they feel in Bruges. One is that they were conscious of the juices of the body, liquid of the body, which was, as the body deteriorated, and enabling that to leach out. But probably more importantly and practically, it was simply to allow the ropes to be pulled out after you put the coffin in.
Okay.
Because when you've got these excessively heavy coffins and you lower them into the grave with the rope, you can't extract the rope. If you've got these little plinths at either end, the ropes are loose and you can just pull them out.
We'll go with that then.
You said early on that the river had been redirected
Yes.
quite late, I imagine.
Yeah.
So do you find it surprising that this ground had been waterlogged when the river was so much further away?
I've digging in Norfolk a few times. No. But like I said, I'll try and go back a bit. So we had, so let's say, originally the river was further along this way.
Yeah.
So, but say, one issue with flooding in this area was already prevalent because of basically the slope up here. So a lot of water, this is basically a lot of wet area already, I think.
And maybe it was a bigger floodplain anyway.
Yes, as I say, this land here is also untouched. So whether we've got more Saxon over here, but unfortunately someone's to go river through the middle. So, but yeah, from conditions on this over on this side of the village as well, it was very wet ground all over. This may have aided this area being preserved just that little bit longer basically giving us what we needed.
Thank you.
I didn't see any sign of any pumps. Were you not using them, or was it deliberately not to use them?
We did. I think we always took it out of the way really. We had one pump here, so basically we took a drainage ditch around here and pumped all the water out. I spent, for that photo, that was a Monday, we turned up one morning and found that. Unfortunately, our accommodation was over here at the owner's holiday cottage. So, as the site assistants kept warm, I sat here with a pump for a day. We went to the shop, chucked it down for half an hour, and it was worse than this. So, we did have one, but we kept moving it on and off site just in case someone noticed what we were doing and came along. Because, like I say, the press release for this was last November. We had to keep it very quiet until then, just in case people came knocking around. Because we also, for the first time, we also had some large tents we put up. So we didn't, if we were basically digging up remains and he chucked it down, we could actually keep working. So it was just a really tight deadline for this project, unfortunately.
Do you have any of your dendro dates back to that?
Like I said, we had one which was for the plank coffin I showed you, which was actually initial date just to see if it was possible to get dates. And that came back to mid-8th century.
And you're waiting for some more?
Yeah, so Historic England's doing the dendro dating, carbon dating, so we're waiting for their initial report back. We've got, the main things we're waiting for now is the dendro dating and some of the animal analysis. The clear thing we did see was basically butcher marks on the bone, clean cuts, things like that. Right. Yeah.
Why is the medieval present church 100 yards away rather than on the centre place?
That I don't know, unfortunately. Like I say, it's basically the tower of the church, we believe it originated in late Saxon period. I'm not special to this, and I'll go Tim maybe answer.
I was going to say, I think you've got to look at, depending on the sort of settlement it is, you can often have 2 or even more churches on a single site. So there's no inconsistency with it being part of a much bigger site, but that part of it falling out of use. So there's church falling into abandonment, or there being a big gap in the cemetery if that chapel or church, whatever it was, fell out of use and then burial continued around the main parish church.
The construction techniques would have been, for a stone-built church, would be much greater than for a timber church.
But that's much later as well.
Yeah.
I mean, from the juxtaposition of the manorial sites of the moated sites and the present church, it sort of looks like a manorial centre.
Yeah.
But would we be looking at a Middle Saxon predecessor of that same manorial centre? In which case, where's the Middle Saxon hall?
Under the church.
Well, maybe, yeah.
Like I say, he was doing a fishing. Basically, that's why I've got a really weird shaped site as well. It's basically fishing lake and also active flood defences and conservation. So, like I say, I think his house got bumped up a level of flood warnings. So he basically put this in as basically, like I say, he owned a holiday cottage down here, so he basically put it as a fishing lake, attraction and things like that, and to stop the road and his land flooding. So, because what we do is basically, any part of development requires environmental, what do we call it now? Before they build anything, we have to clear any archaeology, part of like environmental standards and things like that. So we're paid to go in beforehand to clear the area before we put some machine through it, basically.
Do we have any more questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. That was absolutely fantastic. There's a huge amount to take in there, and I'm sure we're all looking to hear more about it as the analysis continues. And I hope we'll hear more about it in this forum as well.